Welcome to another episode of Insights from the Trenches, a series dedicated to helping ADHD couples thrive by empowering couples with insights from ADHD experts and ADHD peers. I'm Alice, your host. In today's episode, I'm excited to talk with Anita Robertson, ADHD couples therapist, coach, and author of ADHD Us, about the types of therapy that are most effective for both ADHD couples and individual ADHD partners. If you're just starting your search for an ADHD therapist or need to restart that search, this conversation is a must listen. So grab a cup of coffee and let's thrive together.
Hi, Anita. Good to see you today.
Good to
Thank
see
you
you.
for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So I know that there are a lot of people that know about you already, but just in case for people that are not familiar with you, can you share and introduce yourself a little bit and then tell us a little bit about your ADHD journey?
I am a psychotherapist in Austin, Texas. I work primarily with ADHD clients, both individuals and couples. I wrote the book ADHD Us. Great read for those who haven't read it. And I really work from a strength-based model and really in a relational healing, whether it is individual or couple. I'm also about to be finished with my second book on ADHD and motherhood because that's a really big one. And yeah, I mean, that's I like to have fun. I have ADHD myself. I am a mom. And I just, I like to use ADHD strengths to help clients really gain the skills and the tools and the understanding they need to kind of set up their life for success in a very ADHD affirming way. So a lot of the things that I talk about in my book or in my trainings or that I do with clients is a lot of games, a lot of movement, a lot of incorporating a whole bunch of different things that actually work for the ADHD brain. And that's why a lot of people really finally get the tools they need and understanding and self-acceptance. And then that is a game changer for them.
Awesome. And by the way, your book is awesome, along with your course, but we'll talk about that a little later. Help us understand or help the audience understand what inspired you to specialize in ADHD and work with couples.
So I was a couples therapist, a relationship therapist. And so I have ADHD. And my ADHD, for a lot of reasons that I now understand and will be explaining in this second book, motherhood was really hard for me. So kind of I was like, whoa, I need some help. I need to learn some new skills, right? And so I was kind of going on my own ADHD journey because it was just chaos. Like my toddler would just throw things in the floor and I'm like, oh my gosh, so I don't even know what to do, chasing him, like kicking them to the side. I'm like, this is like a safety hazard. So as I was going on my own ADHD journey, talking about maybe trying medicine for the first time, I was also going to trainings on ADHD. And this is all when I was doing kind of a lot of couples therapy trainings at the same time. So as I was sitting in with some of the most amazing relationship therapists and models, I'm also sneaking away and going to the ADHD one. So in that regard, I kind of had this oh my goodness, this would not work for somebody with ADHD, right? Really understanding. I was there, Sue Johnson was presenting and she had, a video of this couple and they were sharing how the emotional experience of the dishes not being done. And I was like, whoa, yeah, that's not going to work for ADHD because they already know that it feels bad and all the things, but that doesn't help them get the tools they need in order to figure out a good system for them, or why is it so hard for them to sometimes do the dishes, right? Because that sometimes is easy and sometimes it's really hard for somebody who has ADHD. So I think that kind of parallel part helped me start assessing for that more in couples and that dynamic. And then just with word of mouth, I kept on getting more and more ADHD clients that, for couples counseling. And because I have ADHD myself, and because I have grown up in a lot of affirming environments, I was able to pull from kind of my repertoire and then now I've gotten a lot more trainings. I collaborate with a whole bunch of different people from different fields. And so that way it makes sense more. Like I see the research of why some of the things I was doing was working. And then of course I get to adapt, grow, because we're learning a lot about ADHD. But really, yeah, like it was just, I have ADHD. I was struggling. I was super interested in like I was doing couples counseling trainings because that was my passion, and they just kind of overlapped. And that is like the most classic ADHD story of like, surprise, yay.
Well, that's good to know, and I'm so glad because you've helped a lot of people in that sense. Our topic today is really about therapy. And one of the things that I've noticed when I was going through this journey is the fact that there are a lot of different types of therapy out there. And then when I went to psychology today, they actually listed 80 plus different types of therapy. So for someone that might be new to therapy because they just got diagnosed or their partner just got diagnosed and they're trying to get therapy that can support them, what is the most common types that when you call someone up, they will start you on, like the type of therapy they will use on you? And what is
So
the benefit for, or the primary goal for that particular therapy?
for couples only?
For couples and for the ADHD individual.
Yeah, so that can be really complicated because there are so many different types. And also there's just, therapists that don't follow a particular training or model. So if you're wanting something in particular, and normally all these for the couples, they all have books, right? Whether it's Gottman, whether it's Sue Johnson with emotionally focused therapy, whether it's, my book or Stan Tacton, Tact. So you can get a sense of what you relate to in a book or when they're doing a podcast or something like that. But a lot of times, really, I would say the most common that I see that I think most people are certified in is the Gottman method, which has a lot of great aspects and strengths. And so the other thing that I would say, like when you're looking for somebody, is somebody who at least says that they're ADHD affirming. And if you do a consult with them and see if it feels like a good fit. Because the other problem is that a lot of the ADHD training, so if they say like ADHD certified or something, a lot of them are very ableist and have a kind of older model of what ADHD looks like versus more of that strength-based and self-compassion part that really is showing that that's where it's needed. And then also too, do they have a collaborative approach? ADHD has so many facets that you want somebody that has a team of people and that will collaborate with that team. So like in Austin, I have an occupational therapist that will see some of my clients that have sensory processing issues, a psychiatrist that's very familiar with ADHD, and sometimes like an individual therapist or whatever they're doing. And so that way we can all work together as a team. And I think because ADHD does have so many different facets and it impacts various things, not only just like attention and focus, that it's really important to know that, hey, like this person can collaborate, that there's not just one model, that they'll be able to work with me. So, and I think Gottman is really good for couples starting out, that it is very structured, which sometimes is hard for ADHD, but also I do find that a lot of ADHDers end up partnering with an autistic person. And so like that model works really well for them, right? Like it's very structured, it's very predictable, it has a lot of evidence and science. And so if you're kind of like new or you don't know what to do, but you want to make sense, that is a really good method, and that they're all trained or they have certifications. So you can look and you'll say like Gottman level 1 or 2 or 3, and you can go to the Gottman website. And like I said, they have plenty of books. So like if one of you, it doesn't even have to be the ADHDer, kind of needs to make sense of some of the chaos or kind of just get some concrete tools, I find that Gottman is a good starting point. And that's what I used to use in the beginning of my couples therapy journey, because that's the training that I mostly had for my graduate school. But then for people who are wanting to do a little bit more deeper work, I really like the people who are certified in EFT, but also you have to have somebody who is knowing how to adapt any of these therapies and interventions to ADHD. So that's the caveat. And so emotionally focused therapy, I think, is great. That also gives a lot more of that deeper emotional connection. And then, of course, there's like my method, which is different, but is also there. And so what I do like, let's see, for the PACT certified therapist that Stan Tacton does, he does a lot more with movement and surprise and those types of things that are really good for ADHD, for learning. And I think that model, like if you're just going to go with, okay, probably what is the most ADHD friendly, I would probably say PACT.
Got it. So that's great for ADHD couples who are looking for a couples therapist. Let's just pivot just a little bit for ADHD partners. There are a lot of ADHD partners that are trying to do therapy for themselves so they can learn their own skill set. Do you have any recommendations of types of therapy they should start with?
Yes. If you are an ADHDer that's just struggling with your executive functions, right? Like of organization, of time management, of kind of just that typical, like, I don't know, feeling like a hot mess, which you're not, but that's the feeling. Like, how come this is so hard for me to do? I recommend starting with skills in groups that help normalize the journey. So I know Leanne, who you interviewed, she has a great skills group. If that's something you're able to do, a lot of ADHDers do have a lot of social anxiety because it normalizes it for you. So much of what ADHDers grow up with are a lot of shame and just very kind of like discarded. So you tend to create a lot of big stories and feelings in your own mind. And so using something with a group, one, hey, that's how we actually learn best just as humans, not just ADHD, is getting to practice it together, getting to see people be brave and courageous and trying something and not getting it right. And it also, like I said, it gives yourself a lot more self-compassion, and also it plays on the excitement of like, oh my goodness, I tried this skill and it worked. You didn't try the tool. Now your good brain's like, oh my goodness, it worked for that person. I'm gonna try it too. And so it's like in my couples group, that's one of the reasons I like working with couples and groups, because how much it brings to each person, to whether they're ADHD or non-ADHD, to not feel alone, or not feel like this is just like only them, or there must be something wrong with them, or they've tried it but not with this flavor, and so what's the point of trying it again? So it is really motivating. So that would be where I say I would start, is getting skills, and that can either be, I know we'll talk about this later, in a coaching model, a group model, or even somebody who specializes in ADHD and executive functioning. And so you're looking for somebody in that regard that's not going to be like, how are you feeling? What do you want to talk about today? What's been going on? Because, hey, a lot of us are really good at talking, and we'll fill space, and then we don't feel like we're getting anything out of it. And also, too, we have that people-pleasing tendency. We don't want the therapist to feel bad if there's a pause, so they're just talk, right? And so you want somebody that is kind of at least giving you some structure with flexibility. For me, I always start my sessions off of kind of reviewing what we covered, what our plan was, and then asking like, hey, is there anything else, though, that has come up that's really important that we should take note of? And as we're building skills of knowing how to kind of re-come back into it and pause and say, like, and that's like a skill, like, hey, just want to check, is this connected to what we're working on? Is this more important, what it is? And so that it has that pause to be like, oh, right, no, let me come back. And then and that's a really great skill to have, right? Of having somebody who can kind of be that gentle guide. A lot of ADHDers do better with that. Now, and so that I would say for somebody who's just needing some skills, of just like, or a basic understanding of ADHD, or how is this, things are just like falling apart because you're overloaded, that would be where I would start. Does that make sense?
So you really prompted a question in my head, because for a non-ADHD spouse or any couples that have found out that their partner has ADHD, the first thing they usually think about is go to a therapist and go get your medication. They start that route. But what you're really introducing is very interesting, because you're saying start with building a community, start with group work that's going to build skills versus going on to one-on-one therapy.
And also for medication, normally psychiatrists are the ones that are diagnosing and prescribing it. Most of them don't do therapy. They will, but they're scale is very high. And so you're really looking at that medication management, but somebody who's informed with ADHD and will collaborate with your therapist. So medication, yes, if you're interested in medication, go get your name on a wait list, because unfortunately most of the time there's a wait to get into a psychiatrist, especially if you're wanting to use insurance, not always, but that's something that you can start with for sure. And so then when you're looking at more of the mental health piece and understanding that, yes. And with the caveat is, if you have a lot of relational trauma, if you have like a lot of fear of vulnerability, that's definitely, hey, if it feels safer for you to start with a therapist, right? And then between a coach and a therapist, you can normally see coaches' styles and see if you connect with them kind of from their social media. And if you're really just looking for skills of like, hey, this is what I need, blah, 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 like I feel fine overall about who I am and what I'm doing. Like I don't have a lot of anxiety. I just need to like figure out how to make appointments and clean out my inbox and those types of things, then a coach would be really great. But if you're also dealing with something, or if you've had any other mental illnesses in the past, like depression or anxiety, mostly like for a lot of ADHDers that did not get the support and treatment in really good environments, what happens when you have untreated ADHD is these secondary conditions that form to kind of compensate for the ADHD. So anxiety is a really common one, because like, oh, if we can stress out and like somebody's going to be mad at me and this and this and this, like it turns on our brain to work, and that's all we know. So that's a really common coping strategy that does turn into constant anxiety, and then it does become another kind of disorder that also medicine can be really helpful with, but you really do need to be treating the ADHD because that's the underlying root of it, and then also with some therapy, because you need to kind of learn new ways of working with your brain that don't have the side effect of anxiety. And that takes a while, especially if you have decades of using it. And so I kind of talk about like either the side effects or like junk food or like clean energy versus dirty energy type deal, depending on what works for you, of kind of saying like, yes, this works. And hey, you know what? You've been doing this tool your whole life. You can go back to stressing out and beating yourself up or like thinking everybody's mad at you. Like you're not going to lose that skill. I promise you that. But let's just try this one. And we want to put like bumps in the road. So if you're dealing with something like that, you really do want a therapist that trained and understands ADHD. And the other part is that there are other therapists out there that are really good at treating other things, and normally they'll refer me for the ADHD part. So you can also see two therapists at once. A lot of my clients have a lot of trauma, and I'll work with an EMDR therapist, which is the eye movement one, and collaborate with them so that way they can kind of get a reset of their brain. I will say, do EMDR in person if you can. Many ADHDers need more than just the eye movement. They have kind of like these little vibration things that you hold in your hand that alternate. There's also, they have a whole bunch of different things that they can do with EMDR. And I found, like for myself in particular, like I need more of that sensory input to make it work, right? So, and that can be really helpful. So you can also have two therapists that are working on different things. And I think that's also really important to know, because most of us do come with something else, unfortunately. And the earlier you kind of get any of these supported, treated, that type of stuff, the easier everything else gets. So like you don't need to struggle harder to prove to other people that you can do it. You want to be able to have that love and acceptance for yourself of saying like, no, if this is hard for me, then I can get support. It doesn't mean anything less of me. It doesn't mean anything like that. Why not? If that makes sense. And that's why I like group work too, because I think it gives a lot of permission for a lot of people who have really learned just to be isolated, just try to do it harder, and they work so hard and they can be successful, but it's just, like I said, it comes with a lot of side effects versus stress, anxiety, relationship ruptures, those types of things. And that's one of the reasons, like you've heard several times, I love working with ADHD couples, because these people work so hard and they're just working in the wrong direction. So when they get the tools and support to be able to connect, then it's game changer, because then it's just, they can put all that energy into really loving, supporting each other and figuring out what works for their relationship.
Let's say if someone has done that first What
Mm-hmm.
is their next step? Should they go into one-on-one therapy? What should they try?
Okay, so, and I just want to mention too, ADA, the ADD.org, has a monthly membership for like $10, and they have tons of groups, right? They have groups for women, groups for college students, body doubling groups, men, parent, all this stuff. So I just want to throw out that that's also a great, great resource too. If you just want to dip your toe into group work just to see what it's like. And then maybe I still would recommend finding more of a local group, because also if you're in a group, then you get great recommendations from that group person for local people. And then also you'll hear from other people like, oh, this therapist really worked for me. And so part of that is like I said, use your resources, because you want to work smarter, not harder, right? Type deal. And I would also look for somebody that can be in person. ADHDers tend to do better in person. There's a few that, for other reasons, tend to do better online. But for the most part, it is good to be in person. And also that way you can use things, and the therapist can introduce things like tools that will combine sensory processing, that will use movement, that type of thing. And then for what I would recommend for somebody with ADHD, it really depends on what you're dealing with. Most ADHDers have a lot of traumatic childhood experiences. They receive a lot of negative comments. They did not get their brains explained to them, or they didn't get their needs met. So they might have been told that they're too much, they're making a big deal out of nothing, or very shamed. And so a lot of ADHDers do need some individual therapy on that to kind of uncover that.
So you brought up a few things, right? And I think times has changed. There's a lot more types of therapy, like you said. EMDR is one. Sensory is another one. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is EMDR and what is sensory therapy? Because I think a lot of people that are just starting to look for therapists don't know these additional therapy exists and what
Mm-hmm.
does it do for the ADHD partner.
So for EMDR, that is a trauma-based therapy. And Leanne is actually, I believe, certified in EMDR, so she would be more qualified. I am not certified in EMDR. But basically what it is it's kind of engaging like both sides of the brain, and it allows somebody to reprocess a traumatic event, which could be a big event. I don't know, you're in a tornado and it was really scary. That's one of them. Or it can be smaller events over time, which tend to generally be like relationship ruptures or criticism or those types of things that have happened probably with a primary caretaker over time. And so what EMDR does, and you have to have a certification in it. So make sure you're looking for somebody who's certified. It it's a structure, and it really helps kind of guide you through whatever event or thing you're working on. And the thing I like about it is, one, the time frame is a lot shorter than like, talking about your past and understanding it and that can take for years. Those things are very important. But what it does is it kind of just like rewires your nervous system, if that makes sense. So, so like when you think about something, or something what we call triggers, like brings up this experience from the past, and really trauma happens in isolation, like it's in the absence of support and witness, in that you feel like it's happening in the present. And so you're reacting to these past feelings, your body's feeling unsafe. So even if you're in therapy and you're talking about it, it can be hard to break through, or it takes a lot longer to break through. And the other nice thing about it, if it works or it doesn't pretty quickly. Like either it's going to work for you, or it's like, okay, 2 or 3 sessions, I'm not doing anything. Nothing's happening. A lot of people feel really exhausted because you're going through some traumatic stuff. So I've used EMDR throughout random times of my life, my birth. After that, that was helpful, because that was a traumatic birth, and a lot of women unfortunately do have a lot of traumatic deliveries. And other things, of loss of other parts, where for me, at least, it was more of a bigger event. And that way I was able to kind of get some of my nervous system released, in that sense that like, I'm not having flashbacks, or I'm not like avoiding it. Right. And so those are things that I would say, like, if that's something that you're dealing with, EMDR can be really great and you should try it. Try it first. And it's the model that does work with other therapies. So you can use both. And it's really common for an EMDR therapist just to be doing EMDR and then having an individual therapist, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about sensory, because you are starting to do some sensory work too. So help people understand how important is sensory for
So,
ADHD partner, and what do you actually get to do in therapy for it?
okay. So one, sensory processing is a game changer. And two, it is not actually it's part of the occupational therapy world, right? And they also need a little bit more training in sensory processing a lot of the time. And so where that focuses is mostly kids, but there are a few unicorns that do work with adults. I just do a lot of trainings and collaborate with an occupational therapist. And I have a training too that you can recommend to your therapist with Carrie that kind of talks about how do we integrate these two fields? How do you adapt common interventions to make them more support ADHD brains? And how do you incorporate sensory processing? So when you're looking, I think it's good to have a therapist who's at least aware of that, of what that term is. And so for me, when I've gone on other podcasts and talked about like sensory communication skills, tools, I'm talking about like, sometimes it makes a huge difference if a couple's outside practicing a skill or talking, they're throwing like a weighted ball back and forth. It's giving you some sensory input. It gives your body cues. It helps you regulate, and it's a lot easier to stay focused. Or talking about changing up your chair, of having a rocking chair, sitting on a yoga ball, talking on a hammock. So these are different things that you want to at least have your therapist know and recognize, of having some basic sensory understanding. I think for the sensory processing part, Carrie is pretty good at explaining it, but also it's almost impossible to get into seeing an occupational therapist that works with adults. But I will say, if you have a kid that also has ADHD, or you think that they have ADHD, get them into occupational therapy and then do whatever your kid is doing. And that's honestly, seriously,
You get 2-for-1, right? 2-for-1.
Exactly. That's probably your best bet. Because I think if going into it, like what I've seen with other clients or people that I've worked with in the UK or something, there's just not a lot there. And so then they're like, I want this. And I'm like, I wish you could have this. But I do say for kids, I think that's good. And I, thank goodness, had a lot of therapist friends. Almost all my friends are neurodivergent, so almost all their kids are neurodivergent. And so they're like, oh, your kid kind of seems like mine at this age. And, when they got to kindergarten, they went to occupational therapy. I wish we would have started sooner. So I put my kid in at 2, and I was like, what is this magical thing? Oh my goodness. And so I started doing some of those things with my clients. And I was like very upfront with like, hey, I don't know if this works or not, but I think it might. So like, if you're up for it, this is like what we're doing in here. And that sort of is like the sensory journey that I started deep diving into, mostly because this also helped my kids sleep through the night. And I was like, what? Why does everybody have to suffer? It was like 3 when he started sleeping through the night. And when you have interrupted sleep, even if it's only one time, you're not fully functional and you're not fully human. And so that's where I began the sensory journey. And then, like I said, we have an online training for clinicians and coaches. And they can get a certification in that. And I think that's really important. And as we've been doing more trainings in this, I'm starting to notice more clinicians start using at least sensory words and terms, or kind of at least acknowledging that. So I think that's really important. And also too, like, when you're looking, if you have anxiety, but none of the mental health treatments have worked, it could be sensory-based anxiety. And so what we're trained in doesn't really work. And so that's why I like having the in-person, so that way you can also have different tools. You're going to be going to their office, and you can even ask, like, how do you make the office, support sensory differences, even if you don't even know what that means. And so they would be able to tell you that. And that's the other thing I was going to say to you, always do a consultation. Even if it's a recommendation, ask for like a 15-minute consultation so you can get a feel for it, So the therapist can tell you, answer any questions, and they can also tell you if you think they're going to be a good fit or not. And I'll always offer consultations because I'm like, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I want to set you up for success. If like it doesn't make sense or what you need is not me, I will try to point you in that right direction because of that overwhelm and that frustration. And like when you work so hard with ADHD to do all the things with insurance, make the doctor's appointments, do all these things, and then it doesn't work or it's not a good fit, it's so defeating.
That's true. And then I think that the other part is there's such a vicious cycle is the fact that you might have found a therapist, regardless if you like it or not, they might switch companies. So
Mm-hmm.
you're starting all over again, which adds to the ADHD because all these things to find a doctor making phone calls are hard. And then you have to rinse and repeat, which really drives the ADHD partner crazy if they are trying to do this
Mm-hmm.
on their own.
Yeah, and even with this, I mean, even non-ADHD, it's a really hard system. And I think it's important to like recognize it's the system that's hard. You're not messing up. Like it is a hard system to navigate. I always say, even being in the field of the medical field myself, I'm like, I shouldn't need to have like another degree to navigate insurance and all these other things and all this other stuff. It's like a part-time job. And so, and finding doctors that work well with ADHD, somehow I found great ones. And it was life changing because I just avoided the doctor before because I'm like, oh, it's so complicated, da 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 da, you know. And I was so young, I didn't really need like a primary care healthcare doctor. But getting doctors that really know you, that really will work with you, you know, and also depending on your age, if you're hitting perimenopause, a lot of times you're going to need hormones and other stuff because that exacerbates some of this ADHD challenges.
Awesome. So thank you for sharing like what they are, like EMDR and sensory. Are there any other types of therapy that might be beneficial for the ADHD?
Yes. So DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, that one is really good, especially if you struggle with RSD, that rejection sensitivity dysphoria, that you either hear criticisms or rejections that may or may not be there, but it kind of almost feels like this overwhelming shutdown. And that one is a really good to build tools for regulation. A lot of times it's done in group, which is fantastic. And you can also get individual as well. And so that one is also really, I think that's good if you have a lot of intense emotions and a lot of times when you do have intense emotions, those are where the secondary coping skills come in that might have like some side effects like eating, drinking, all of these things that are nicotine that also are kind of like self-medication in some ways when you're looking at kind of how does it interact with the ADHD brain, but might not be what you're wanting long term for your own health goals, if that makes sense. So I think DBT is really good for gaining some of those emotional regulation tools. If you are like, oh yeah, no, oh, that's the worst thing to feel like I disappointed something. It feels so crushing. That one I would recommend. I also like ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. That's also, I do think that is a good one as well, because a lot of times we do hold ourselves to a totally different standard. And I think that one helps with more self-compassion and growth and also accepting things the way they are. And that can be a big struggle. Like it's hard to accept when things suck, but it also allows you to move forward when you have the information. Okay, so just to recap, right? EMDR for trauma. And then DBT for those intense emotions and that feeling of rejection. And then ACT is a good one, especially if you have anxiety. So if you're just kind of doing snippets of what a lot of ADHDers experience.
That's great to hear.